you've been browsing homes in Cape Coral and you keep coming across these older 1960s, 70s, or 80s homes that look brand new on the inside, a fresh kitchen, updated bathrooms, new floors, great location, close to the water, stop for a second before you fall in love with one of these homes, because there is a federal regulation called the 50% rule that every buyer in Cape Coral needs to understand before they make an offer on an older home. And if the right due diligence is not done, it could cost you significantly more than you bargained for. I'm Barry Cessna, your Golf Access Realtor here in Cape Coral. And if you're thinking about buying, selling, relocating, or retiring here in Cape Coral, let's connect. Click the link to schedule your complimentary video call with me. All right, let's get into it. The 50% rule is a FEMA regulation tied to the National Flood Insurance Program. It applies to homes in a special flood hazard area, which covers most of Cape Coral. Here's what it says. If the cost of repairing or improving a home equals or exceeds 50% of the building's market value, the entire structure must be brought up to current flood elevation and modern building codes. Not just the part being repaired or renovated, the entire structure. This triggers in two situations. The first is storm or flood damage. If a home is damaged by a hurricane and the repair cost hits that 50% threshold, the owner can simply not fix what was broken. They have to bring the whole building into current compliance. The second is voluntary renovation. If you remodel the kitchen, add a room, or make major improvements, and the total cost crosses that threshold, the same requirement applies. What does bringing a structure into current compliance actually mean in practice? It can mean elevating the entire home to current flood-based elevation, which in some parts of Cape Coral means raising the structure to 8 feet above sea level. It can mean installing flood vents, relocating utilities above the flood line, and meeting every current building code requirement. In some cases, it means the home essentially needs to be rebuilt from the ground up. The cost of that compliance work can run into the tens of thousands of dollars on top of whatever the original repair or renovation was going to cost. Here's what I see regularly when working with buyers in Cape Coral. After Hurricane Ian hit as a Category 4 storm in September 2022, a significant number of older homes in flood zones were damaged. Many of those homes were repaired and renovated. Some of them were done correctly with full permits, proper inspections, and complete compliance with the 50% rule. Others were not. And from the outside or even from the inside, it can be very difficult to tell the difference. What you see is a beautifully renovated older home in a great location close to the water. Newer finishes, update systems, attractive price point. What you may not see is whether that renovation was permitted correctly, whether the 50% threshold was properly calculated, and whether there is undisclosed storm damage history that was not addressed properly. And here's where it gets serious. In April 2024, FEMA stripped Lee County and Cape Coral of their community rating system discounts, specifically because of unpermitted work and lack of documentation after Hurricane Ian. The community rating system discount is what reduces flood insurance premiums for everyone in the county. When FEMA pulled those discounts, every flood insurance policyholder in Lee County saw their costs go up. Unpermitted work does not just affect the individual property, it has consequences for the entire community. For you as a buyer, it means this: if you purchase a home where post-Ian repairs were not properly permitted and damage occurs in a future storm, your insurance company can deny the claim based on unpermitted work. You could also face significant costs bringing the property into compliance before you can sell it to a future buyer. And if the unpermitted work is discovered during the appraisal or inspection process, it can kill your financing entirely. This is not a minor administrative issue. It is a potentially deal-breaking financial exposure that needs to be identified before you close, not after. Here is something specific to Cape Coral that works in your favor as a buyer or homeowner. And it's worth understanding because it directly affects how much flexibility you have when renovating or repairing an older home. Many municipalities track renovation costs cumulatively over a set period of time towards the 50% threshold. So if you spent money on repairs or improvements in prior years, those costs can count against you when you try to make additional improvements today. That could turn a straightforward renovation into a compliance nightmare if you're not paying attention. Cape Coral led the way in changing that. Following Hurricane Ian, the City Council voted unanimously in December 2022 to remove the 5-year cumulative look-back period entirely. The reasoning was straightforward. Homeowners who had done the right thing before Ian, replacing roofs, installing impact windows, hardening their homes, were being penalized for those improvements when they tried to repair Ian damage. The city decided that was not fair and eliminated the lookback altogether. What that means practically is that in Cape Coral, only the current project's cost is evaluated against the 50% threshold. If you spent $80,000 renovating a kitchen 3 years ago and now you want to make additional improvements, those prior costs do not count against you. You start fresh with each new project. Cape Coral was ahead of the curve in this. Now the rest of Florida has now caught up. Governor DeSantis signed SB 180 into law in 2025, which prohibits every local government participating in the National Flood Insurance Program in Florida from adopting a cumulative look-back period statewide. What Cape Coral put in place locally out of necessity after Ian is now the law of the land across the entire state. That is a meaningful protection for anyone buying an older home in Florida flood zones. Now, it gives you the flexibility to renovate and improve over time without the risk of prior work accumulating towards a threshold that forces a full compliance rebuild. Understanding that this protection exists and that it applies to your specific property is part of what separates an informed buyer from one who is flying blind. Here's the practical guidance that protects you as a buyer. Before you make an offer on any older home in Cape Coral, especially one that has been renovated or that sits in an area that took water during Hurricane Ian, you need to do 4 things. First, pull the permit history on the property. The city of Cape Coral maintains permit records and your realtor can request them. You want to see what work has been done, when it was done, and whether it was properly permitted and inspected. Second, understand how the 50% threshold is actually calculated. The calculation is based on the building's market value alone, not the land value, and not the total purchase price you are paying. On an older Cape Coral home, the land can represent a significant portion of the total value, especially on waterfront lots. That means the building value, which is what FEMA uses to set the threshold, can be considerably lower than what you are paying for the property. Your realtor or local contractor familiar with FEMA compliance can help you get a reasonable sense of where that threshold sits on a specific property before you commit. Third, get a flood elevation certificate if one does not already exist on the property. This tells you exactly where the home sits relative to current flood base, elevation requirements, and what compliance could cost if the threshold were triggered. Fourth, ask specifically about Hurricane Ian damage history and how it was addressed. A seller flood disclosure is required in Florida, but it does not always capture everything. Your realtor should be asking these questions directly and getting documentation of what happened to that property in 2022 and how the repairs were handled. These are not optional steps. They are the difference between a smart buy on an older Cape Coral home and an expensive surprise after you close. None of this means you should avoid older homes in Cape Coral. There are beautifully renovated older homes here in prime locations that were done correctly, permitted properly, and represent genuine value at their price point. The location advantage of some of these older waterfront properties, close to the open water, established neighborhoods, wider canals, is real, and it does not come cheap in newer construction. What it means is that older homes require a more thorough due diligence process than newer construction. The buyers who do that process correctly end up with a great property at a great price in a location that newer homes simply cannot replicate. The buyers who skip it are the ones who call me after closing with questions I wish they had asked before. If you are researching Cape Coral real estate and want straight answers about what you are actually getting into before you make a move this big, that is exactly the kind of conversation I have on strategy calls. A lot of people who found this channel the same way you did have sat down with me and walked through their specific situation before committing to anything. Whether they were looking at older homes, newer construction, or just trying to figure out if the Cape Coral made sense for them at all. They left that call knowing exactly where they stood. The link to book is right below this video. It takes about 30 seconds to grab a time. You can also text or email, whatever works best for you. I'm Barry Cessna, your Cape Coral Golf Access Realtor. Go ahead and book that call. Let's go.